So, I'm ahead. Where am I? Hold on a minute, Peter, please get the.
Yeah, so what our intention is, while Sharon's doing her thing, and the last thing you want to do is pressure the bigger person. And so she's working through that. We will carry on, make best use of time for things that we can tick off, and push our way through to, but we will be bringing Sharon back in, when it's ready. We've abbreviated the agenda. We're looking to just do a couple of key things, and see where we go with it.
So am I. Okay, then everyone, if we can please go to page 27, hand over to Pete for the key assumption.
So thank you, Your Worship. There's a paper in the agenda papers, but most of it's summarised in the slides, which is on page 17 of the slides. The first one is key assumptions. This is really a recap of where we've got to, and focusing on the big items that we have a legal and statutory requirement to cover, which is sort of summarised there. It was in the paper. I won't significantly reiterate, except you need to cover financial estimates, life cycle of estimates, sources of funds, etc., and significant forecasting assumptions if there's uncertainty. So that's been part of the process that we've gone through. With the identified assumptions we're discussing here are the important ones. And just to recall, we've looked at climate change, technology, water reform, levels of service and various activities. Your consideration of finances over time at workshops and current inflation growth with legislation, etc. One of the things that it's part of the process, where it's appropriate, is sensitivity analysis, and there's some notes there about for investment and borrowing interest, borrowing investment. It's considered that sensitivity analysis is not warranted, as the directive being followed is to keep the rate subsidy from the investment returns low. And Meeting Council has a lot of capacity before investment returns drop below the minimum for rate subsidy. And a sensitivity for cost of finance movements is proposed once we go through the finances out of this session. So that'll have to follow. A sensitivity analysis for the cost of water is not considered necessary, excuse typo, as Council has canvassed basically the water in and water out options. And this is a live discussion, so the answer for that will be what it is when we get to it. I might just stop there and ask if there's any questions on that. Your Worship.
Pete, everyone comfortable? Already been through it, we should know where we are.
One of the big things that we covered earlier in the year were growth assumptions. It's a mandatory consideration. I think you're familiar. We've covered population growth, rating, base economic activity, and other things. Walter Clark, Utility NZ, provided a report, 30th of March. One of the things that didn't transpire was bringing that for formal ratification. And that will be done as part of the meeting on the 25th of January. The report was circulated to you this week. The final report. But there's no material difference between the final report and the briefing you got from Walter Clark in March. The financial assumptions that we covered in the recent workshop, return on investments, we'll note there. At the time, cost of finance was taken at 5.25. Borrowing interest rates, similarly 5.25. There was a discussion about aligning those two. Inflation rates, to use the Burl 2023 cost adjusters, was discussed. Rate subsidy held at 800K, and Water's depreciation and loan principal assumptions were part of that discussion you had earlier. subject today. Directions arising from any consequentials from this morning will come to bear on the final financial strategy. Other matters, we're all aware of policy changes, Three Waters, and that's evolving as we speak. Policy implications have been incorporated into activity management plans, and we discussed the significant engagement policy last week. Endorsing the assumptions that we're making is not considered as significant in relation to that policy. The implications of the discussion, the assumptions will be significant to the public though. And in that context, whilst not a consultation question, it is a matter for the LTP to canvass. Once the assumptions are considered formally by you, they'll be incorporated into a pre-audit consultation package. That's the 25th of January, and that will become subject to that audit. After that, it will become subject to a formal consultation process. Next steps, really following discussion at this session, final drafting of the assumptions will take place. You'll note that I haven't actually gone into all the detail of the activity management plans assumptions. They've been discussed. They'll be incorporated as has been discussed in those plans. And back to the meeting, all roads lead to 25 January. I think that's the sum of that briefing. I'm doing it quickly to get through. Any questions to you, Your Worship?
Everything seems to be in place to me. Anyone got questions, issues? No, just going over where we've been.
The next session is something we need to, I'll brief you on, and I might just ask for something to be handed out as I explain where we're going to with this. We talked last week about the significant engagement policy. Now, this part of the conversation talks about the significant word of the policy. We've been talking about a lot of issues over the months, the workshops, and in this policy, a matter will be considered significant where one or more of the criteria below are considered high. So those criteria, we'll skip through them, potential level of final consequences, degree of impact, how many ratepayers or residents are affected, degree of community interest, state of consequences of the decision might be controversial, impacts on the existing long-term plan and your plan. They off. Just take a break. Just some of the screens at the back aren't working.
Yeah, it was terrible.
Sorry, those at the back. In the interest of running out of time, getting through, we'll press on. And potential impact on wellbeing, legal requirements, where they may exist, degree of impact on a strategic asset. Most of those strategic assets are covered, well, those strategic assets are addressed in the AMPs. So that's something we've got to do, and we're going to basically show you what the analysis is to date that you've just had put in front of you. So what we've done is we've gone through and listed the issues we've been covering over the workshops. And now what we're looking at is looking at the significance of those in order to inform the formal consultation and questions that we've been canvassing. So this is a sort of a expected process. The auditors will be looking through this and we'll tell you how it's how it's transpired. We've used a scale for each of the items that I listed above to highlight high, medium. We've rated them high, medium and low in A to give them a score, which I'll come to in a minute. But the more important thing is not so much a score, but how many of those criteria have a high rating. That's the test of significance. The score is really just a nominal way of looking at how all the elements hang together. The summary of the issues handout lists the issue and highlights a bit of key information, most of which you've seen before in the form of slides. Identifies each issue, for each issue, the number of significant criteria that reach the threshold, as I just said. This is the primary significance test. There is a nominal, and a very nominal, total of scores for each issue. Max score being 9 criteria, times, so 9 times 3 equals 27. And really that's just a ballpark thing to give you, I've completed here the number, just to give you an idea of how it's sort of rated across a range of things. I haven't clearly proposed we're going to go through and renumber those and look at them all, because it is a nominal process, but it's there just to give scale on the broad range. That sort of leads to possible consultation treatment, and it sort of takes 2 levels. As you've probably experienced in the past, if you read the consultation document, for example, in the last round, there's formal consultation, and they're the big ticket items. But embedded within it, there's references to a lot of other material, and they lend themselves to asking questions. They're not formal consultation. You might ask a question about a project, for instance. So what I would do is, just bear with me. What you've got in front of you is a summary of the issues, and I might stop there and ask you, Your Worship, whether you would like to just look at this at a high level or go through each one or just ask questions about any of them.
So Tim, I see that while Pete's been talking, we're having a squeegee lock. None of them are valve bouncing me. Has anyone been valve bounced by what they read in the criteria for meeting the threshold consultation?
We know we've got a high criteria for 3 waters, but nobody can come up with a question yet because they're not actually sure what it would be, if it was to be. So that's, I think, probably highlighted that we just sort of need to hold the fort on that one and see what life looks like on the 25th. But it's no point if you haven't got a question.
I could give you one that my mother's anti-swearing. Mother had to get in.
You'll also note, and it's Pete's done this well, the team's done it well, and read that we've picked up that particular issue about the special consultative process for Milton. So it actually gets aligned with where you ended up with for that item. Just highlight the again, my community housing that had come through from the asset management planning and the idea around those questions which had been previously identified, so they're there as well. And other than that, we were just talking that in the past, I think we've overlooked it, but in the past, we've always had questions around, have we got the financial strategy right? I think it's actually more important now with, we would have to be saying what we were proposing, around the debt and all this sort of thing for what we're going out with and the decisions that we took, all that sort of stuff in that general sense of have we got that right? And so that needs to be in there. And similarly, again, just checking with the community, living and working strategy, climate change side of things. Just had that opportunity for that feedback. And the other one to highlight is probably number 14. Tell you what, even though they were rushed, the team has still got numbers on rows and things to be able to reference. So pretty good. Mount Cooey, we just want to make the point that,
The changes to waste services.
yes, that the view was that to meet the legislative requirement, we're talking about, we feel to meet the waste target, which are legislated, that we don't think there's a consultation option to do something other than meet the targets,
Well, there is,
other than meet the target.
but the targets, we're talking about district-wide dealing with that issue when it only affects 2 of our townships and the population, isn't it? On the-
No, it affects all of the refuse that's coming into through our curbside collection. So that's why we're saying, if we're going to continue with the curbside collection and not do something radically different, we need to have a 4-bin system. That was what we went through at the workshop. So whilst there's
No, but
no,
legislation-wise, our smaller townships don't have.
well, it can't go into Mount Cooey. They've got to do something else with it. Can't come through the curbside collection. So if we're going to meet
Yeah, that's right.
if we're going to meet our diversion targets at this stage, let those communities come forward and tell us how they're going to do it. Because I suspect that you might have a few people who are keen to do that, but not lots and lots. So if we're going to seriously meet our diversion targets, we need to be upping our game in terms of the services we provide and diverting what we've got coming in. Otherwise, we're not going to meet our 50% diversion target by 2030.
But Jules, that means
But
like,
it's still an opportunity for a small community. Instead of spending $500 a year, they can come up with income.
but what you're saying is that glass cannot go in that red bin.
No.
Once this is being, if that goes through, so the small towns cannot opt out and chuck it in the red bin. And hope it goes into the-
Well, sorry, what we're trying to say is at this stage, whilst there might be some things around the edges, there's not actually a massive consultation question. It's about explaining the situation. Council's made a commitment to meet those targets. This is how the advice we've had to date suggests this is actually how that can be met. If the community can come up with a way they want to do it, and they've got to get buy-in from that whole community, then that could be considered as part of the process.
So we're suggesting, in the project section, there is explanation and an opportunity for feedback submissions, but there's no particular consequence of option A, option B. You follow?
Yeah.
So they still have an ability to understand the position and if a community wants to do something, say something. But there's no A, B.
Further to what Michelle said, that you can't read that the bottles in red. So what about if you get a skip from? You can't mix up the rubbish in there, or is that got to be all separated out as well?
It's not curbside.
Not curbside.
But
So,
that-
sorry, Laura.
That can still go to Mount Killy.
Correct.
Only if we allow glass to go into Mount Cooey.
I chuck all this stuff into my skip, and there's all rubbish and a few bottles and all that. And that gets dumped at Mount Killy, but you can't do it with the. Correct.
Just to be clear too, the WMUP has been consulted on in parallel with the LTP as well. So that's where we've set out some of that information around the waste targets and the rationale. So that's a whole lot of additional information that gives some context to the information that'll be in the LTP. Laura was going to do behind. I'll see her at the back.
Were you waving? I was looking, waiting for it. Come on up.
You have to come up here, Laura.
Cheap.
Thank goodness you're near to that. Speak to that.
Just to acknowledge the comments around skips. We have lost my words. We need to do our best to reduce waste. What you do personally is your choice, but as a council, under the new targets and legislations, we do need to do our best to reduce waste to landfill by providing services like this. I understand the moving ahead with rolling out the curbside collection to all areas. I hear what you're saying, Dane, in regards to allowing communities to do something themselves. Rolling out a curbside collection to all areas, all current curbside collection areas, will allow us to meet those targets. Not rolling out to all areas. So if we use a Waka, for example, and only leave them with a rubbish and recycling collection, we would need to increase services at the transfer station. We don't yet have numbers or costs on what that would look like to improve those services. The costs of the transfer station at the moment are not true costs. They're not user pay services. While they're intended to be that way, the number of people paying to use those services is very small. In order to cover those costs, you would have to have user pays charges, and would people use those services? So there need to be a little bit more work done. You could still ask the question of whether you wanted to only roll it out to Buckley and Milton and increase the services at the transfer stations, but there would need to be more work done around that.
The other question, Laura, for you, can't remember what document it is I was reading, but there was talk of reducing picking up on 100k roads.
Yes.
Now, I sort of counted from Tepanui to just coming council one morning, and it's astronomical how many along that main route. And a lot of them won't have side road they can go off. That's not going to be easy. So that would really chop down the numbers again.
Yes.
I gather that's just a health and safety thing, is it?
It's a very much so a health and safety thing. It's something that's new, only just coming to our attention. We've been aware of it. Council's policy has allowed people on the collection routes to opt onto the service, and those numbers have increased over the years. So it is a piece of work that staff will have to do to unpack that, look at the numbers.
Well, it's
identify the areas.
You know what will happen to that stuff, don't you? Yeah.
So is that being brought up under the Road to Zero legislation or through the way?
Yeah.
So the Road to Zero got scrapped yesterday.
I don't think it's linked to Road to Zero. I think it's linked more with health and safety, best practice, and the waste management side of things. Because we don't have massive numbers on the roads like they do in Auckland and Christchurch. It hasn't posed an issue for us, but it's definitely something that we need to do our due diligence on to ensure that we are meeting.
Any guess on where the rubbish is going to go?
Yeah.
Same spot it goes here, in the hole.
Now, further questions for Laura while we've got the ability to ask?
I suppose we're just reinforcing that is a significant one, but it's an explanation rather than a consultation question.
Do they actually know, will the people actually know that's gonna cost them $500 a year when they're paying now 170 for a wheelie bin, and they're gonna be paying $500?
No, they're more than that. It's way more than 170.
So it's in the form of the explanations, right? So what we're saying is it's important for us to make sure the public or the communities are aware of the impact.
Yeah.
So we do have to word it correctly to reflect the impacts,
$500.
and then generate the ability for them to provide feedback. I mean, that's that important part of the consultation document that says there's some real key areas that we do have to do some explanations, because people would never see that in the fine print. So that's an important area.
Will we put the dollar amount on speakers?
You will put an estimate in.
Yes, because we know it's in the budget, so we know what the estimate should be. And that side of things. So that's all we were highlighting. Or the other thing I thought to mention, which is in also to be consulted on. Peter, we've got to consult on the LTP, waste minimisation strategy, what was the other one? Climate change. They're all going to be done concurrently. And then the fourth one, which we always do, which is fees and charges. And I forgot to mention, it's just slipped my mind. We were looking at options of increasing fees and charges by 5 or 10% because they haven't been put in there. But the total quantum, I think we figured out for 5 or 10%, really not a lot of dollars, because fees and charges really don't generate a lot of revenue. I think it was about $110,000. That's a positive story. It does need to go up, and we should put some dollars in there for additional revenue, not to forget it, right? Because if everything else is going up, If rates are going up, people expect fees and charges to go up and do something. And we just did blanket 5 or 10%. Given options, but it doesn't give us a lot of dollars. It's not hugely significant, but it does. I did need to remind us that we need to do something. But those are the only highlights, Your Worship. Unless council, I mean, like if you take a step back and breath, right? We just fed all this, and you just had a look at it. But if you think about everything we've just been dealing with, is there any other subject material that that we've totally overlooked? That you might think is, heck, that's public interest. That's something we should be asking the public for consultation.
That's what I've been going through. It's no, I can't think of one. By the look of the faces, we're all the same, are we? Nothing else to be added, or we would have said them.
Like Simon has spring one on us. That question on the community housing, so let's just say the one question is, do you agree with the proposed approach of focusing on the targeted maintenance regime to keep the housing cost neutral for ratepayers? So increase rents to all maintenance. The next question is like being nice to your community, should we improve the quality of supply? Well, you should. But how? Yeah, what is it? There's a cost to it, right? So people could get quite suckered into going for the second option, not realising there's actually a rate system.
No, it does. No, well, it's not a.
So there's only going to be one of these questions.
No, but it does say. I mean, through a mix of, and you got to remember that if you are putting a question, there's still an explanation to it. So it would give you an example. We've got the information of what that option is. It's in the asset management plan. We should be able to say what would be the a scenario of increased rate requirement if you're going to go down there. So they do see that.
Right, so we've got a wee hiatus, because I do have one other thing.
There's one more subject that I wanted to do, so I just need to Sharon.
So while Steve's off being Sharon, so we're getting it back that early in the new year, the government's going to come back to us and lay out the grant master plan. At the point of no return for us is the 25th of January. On the 25th of January, we come back real tight on our deadlines to get it to the printer to meet our other statutories. Let's say, for argument's sake, that the government came back to us on the 12th of January and totally changed it. What do we do? I don't want to go trying to call everyone in and you're on your holidays and that. Are we just rolling with it, or?
That's not going to happen.
Well, have he said, I will be back to you on the 10th of January, but he said early new year, which is probably February, which is too late.
We were going to continue the discussion work, the operative work, with the AMPs last week, and also the submissions. But speaking to the Chief Executive, we believe that the information that we've discussed today, this morning, basically gives us enough information to not go through those again, and we'll work that through in the documentation that comes through to you in the
So you're presuming?
at the end of at the end of January. So the first part was the AMPs, and that really was a recap of the work that had already been well canvassed. The second part was matters that related to annual plan submissions mainly. But if you, for you, Your Worship, if there are matters that you do want to talk about now in the minutes we've got before Steve turns up, we can do that.
Do we, yeah.
Well, team do you, I don't.
So we never dealt with the swimming pools and all that through those annual meetings, did we? With the AMPs at the last workshop, we can't, where do we finish it? Community housing?
Yes, we did, but you might, going through you, Your Worship, you might, going through the conversations this morning, you've been talking about some of the major swimming pools. It's been basically the pointy ends of budgets.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, come on, brother. Can't talk about swimming pool, leave it there.
What's that?
Well,
No, all we talked about was.
I noticed that some of them, I did have comments last week, but when I'm not seeing it in front of me,
Cut short.
which I wanted to make, because I thought they were a wee bit.
Well, that's important
Information.
to talk about for you, Your Worship. I'm just, I'll be guided by what you need to do. So through you, Worship, if there are comments on the apps, would it be feasible to actually just have those submitted in writing, email? We take account of them. But if there's matters of material discussion, then we probably need to do it now.
Can I just still hover on Ali before I go to John? Because you didn't really get a whack at it. Oh, you want to have a bit of time?
Just give me time to bring them up, please.
No, John, where are you?
Well, so just carrying on from last week, there was a lot of options given to us on various topics, and one of them was the Westago Museum. And there was options there of not funding or funding, whether we're going to go at those questions. So are those questions still going to be in there?
Okay, and so can I just ask, you're referring to the annual plan submission component?
Which is what we're carrying on from.
Oh,
Yeah.
So we've got two things going here. So clearly there's a bit of a desire to continue the conversation.
Well, I thought we were, because you just said we were carrying on from last week.
So what I said at the beginning, the suggestion was that we'd covered most of it, and but clearly you want to talk about it. So I'll be guided.
So on the issues of, for instance,
Well,
West
the question
Otago, the
You
swim.
know, like last week on one of the papers,
I'll go.
It's quite split that paper, wasn't it?
I'll,
there was a whole lot of option questions on various things,
Page, John?
including budget,
TV.
food hub, well, that was one of them. The whole heap in there.
so what I might suggest for you, Your Worship, I'll pull up the slides.
Which page was it, John, please?
Under workshop agenda?
12 or 15, 12, 13, well, this is, yeah, the one I'm talking to is on page 14 of the 15, the revised agenda last week. Agenda workshop.
Okay, so we did prepare for this. It was just the amount of time we had today that has got us to this point. So not in correct order. The question relates to session 9, previously planning submissions. We had the transport conversations, and the directives from last week were these ones, which is as listed. I won't go through those. Chris Bopp is here to talk to the second slide, not discussed, on the 7th, is those ones. We'll come to West Otago in a minute. Chris, did you want to talk to this, please?
What page are you on, Michelle?
5 or 15.
Which document was that?
Further discussion.
Got to go back to last week.
Yeah, that's last week.
Council, Richard.
Yeah, there's not really an impact on the long-term plan. That was basically what the discussions were about. We promised those submitters to the 23-24 annual plan that we will give some consideration. We have a larger picture. We discussed it with the chief executive. Made it to see. We can go back to them and say, not consider this point of time, but you're welcome to resubmit to the ATP official. That's in a nutshell. We're not talking big use. Tea Road on the cycle lane is sort of talking, the estimate was $250,000 to shift Tea Road. Our estimate is closer towards $500,000. Why should it come at a cent to the ratepayers at all? That's part of the Cleveland Model Trail. All we need to do is give permission for them to do that, but we don't want to have a maintenance hospital pass rate in the day either, because there is an area that's subject to slips. So that's an easy one. I have received some feedback with regard to warning lights on public roads from the City Council. They have ceded that responsibility over to the airport at Dunedin, who stops traffic as and when planes land and take off and so forth. We need to do a little bit more investigation. The biggest thing there is I need to talk to Elia Otago directly and see what their concerns are, why they want to stop the traffic on our heavy traffic bypass. I think that's a conversation we need to have with the heavy haulage transport and so forth as well. But again, no impact on us from a financial perspective. Where we can, we will make small improvements within existing operational budgets, but it's not a big ticket item.
Questions, Tim? Any? So where will we, firstly with John and then to Ellie, West Otago Museum, was it?
So I'll just going through the rest of these.
Thanks, Chris.
No worries, thank you.
Through your worship, I might go directly to the one in question, and we can skip back or jump around as need be. So, and then go back to your question, Councillor Ludden. So the West Otago Vintage Museum, this is what was put. So requested a grant of 200,000 towards a planned new build. I think the project, from memory from the paper last week, is in the order of about $1 million. New storage facility to house and display extensive collection. The options were grant 200,000, loan fund 200,000, and no funding contribution. So election in the council.
Through you, Your Worship, it might be useful to consider where that's paid from. That might help the discussion if there's some thoughts on where that should be paid from.
Well, I've got my question.
We'll remember that one.
You do.
So, Mr. Chair, so
The museum job.
museum, yeah, so you've already raised, what sort of funds have you already raised?
I've done quite a lot of earthworks themselves, they've all sectioned and probably earthworks that were a couple 100,000.
Yeah, I think from memory, 200,000
Yeah.
and 40,000 in the bank.
They're still doing, they're still collecting scrap in that too.
Yeah, so, and they've got a cash contribution to go towards the build as well, over and above what they've done so far, or?
The project can be done now, so they're asking for 20% up.
Yeah,
I think they're going to fundraise themselves through various means, like fundraising, sourcing other funds.
yeah,
Various things. I mean, the reason I bring it up is the directly affects rates, so therefore it should be a consultation question along the plan.
That's right, yeah.
But it has a ramification, so that's why, I mean, I know it's a long day, but all these things we're gonna be talking about last week.
You're right, yeah, we have to.
So,
Yeah.
the rates.
You've got to address it, yeah.
That's the same with the CCTV stuff too,
Yeah.
because they're.
Yeah, well, it's
Each town.
That's right,
That's
yeah.
right.
And here's another clear example of last week's one with a Wacker community, like these guys have already got skin in the game. Over $200,000 investment already, and they're still raising, so like, these are the communities we want to be encouraging and supporting.
Yep.
That's a no-brainer as far as I'm concerned.
So,
Where do you get the money from?
Lost.
Yeah.
In all reality, a loan to something like that, a loan's gonna be paid back. It's like paying back something in a swimming pool, it's never gonna stand on its own feet, it's never gonna wash its face. I mean, I would have thought that round up, I'm not saying that. It's never gonna create an income, a significant income to pay a loan, I would have thought.
What about the community not being smart, the community board, also backed.
Community boards put about 650,000 to various facilities around Tapanui in the last 10 years, 230,000 to the swimming pool.
That's what I'm saying.
So we've got.
As the ladder should be.
We've spent all our money on our community projects, on our community facilities. We've 100% supported ourselves.
So that option's exhausted.
Chris,
I think it's reasonable that this comes from a grant. In the end, does depend somewhat on our investment returns, but funded these sorts of activities from grants in the past. Been only too willing when we had the income and much more flush to do so that I think it's been hanging around now for long enough. Perhaps we make a decision at the LTP time.
Well, what questions are we going to put in the old?
That's right. What's the question?
for me, I don't know whether I stay my usual miserable self today or I wait for Sharon to come on the door and maybe I'd hate to go, let's do grant. And then Sharon comes on the door and we've just made it by Gossamer, but we've tipped ourselves over again. So to me, well, so we wait until Sharon comes on the door and let's just see what we got. Because
Well, if
we've been
If
saying.
you're moving option one comes to the ball wheeler, I'll second that.
What was it?
If we take it from a grant, it doesn't affect the rates. It does diminish our investment returns somewhat. Whether that's interest or
Bring it to the LTP.
actually have to dip into the capital.
Not today.
Yeah, but so it's not going to affect what Sharon just helps us. Decision making.
So are you saying that we go to consultation?
No, I think it's come to us as part of the annual plan. It was late. So I think we just carry
This is not a
it
decision.
over to the long-term plan. It's not a consultation question. We just regard it as a submission at the time, make a decision.
Through you, your worship, we, in the last LTP, we actually, it wasn't a consultation question, but we did have some information in there about funding $200,000 towards the Awaken pool. That gave people the ability to submit on it, and then you consider it through the
So
process.
is that what you want to do now, Bruce?
I think that's the way to go.
That gives the opportunity for input from the community
Well,
and.
it's in the system, then, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's the way forward, it's in the
Yeah.
system, that's all I'm asking. They don't been good enough to wait a year.
Yeah,
yeah.
and we have a far clearer picture on the day we make, so.
Yeah, exactly.
So is that direction? Oh, hold on, has anyone got a counter for? Right.
To put it in context, your worship, loan repayments at 5.25%, if we were loan fund it rather than take it out of reserves, are about $14,500 a year. We currently fund $60,000 a year to the district museums. So it's not even a quarter of what we're contributing towards district museums.
Yeah, but in fairness, we put that collective so that they had autonomy over their fund.
Just putting into context of what you are funding now.
Yeah.
District museums.
Yep.
That cost.
Cool.
less than the precinct.
It's one minute.
Yeah, that's it.
Next.
Okay.
If you've got direction,
Through you, your worship, we can jump back to question of councillor Ludeman, but that's jumping into a different set of.
It's totally.
just before then, there was a wee one, what was it, security cameras or something, someone said.
This is.
Policy.
Okay, so.
We're talking about the guidelines now.
Isn't this the Kaitangata one?
Yeah.
I think this is Kaitangata, isn't it?
No.
We talked about Danes last week.
We did Danes last.
I was
I think
wondering.
this is Kai.
So,
Which was public policy, but district.
So the paper that was circulated last week, which this summarise, alludes to, what it did was, it went through two things. What are the sort of considerations that you might have in a policy, which was the thing that was that came out of the annual plan process. So we did some basic work on that, and that was in that paper. But when you got to the conversation about funding Awaka cameras, to some extent you had a conversation substantially, about 80% of what this is about.
Correct.
And in effect, it virtually landed, in general terms, on those directions that are in there, which was, I'll go to the second one first. In effect, you agreed to an ad hoc CCT submission being received, for all the reasons we know. This suggested that it might be subject to some basic, those sort of submissions will include legislative requirements and guidelines, ongoing management requirements, etc. But that's implied in what you discussed last week. And you also last week indicated that continue the development of a CCT in public places policy. So to some extent, through you, Your Worship, I think that's where we got to. So that's pretty well covered.
Yep.
Alan.
But I think, didn't Kaitangata, while they were turned down, I thought it was put through to the long-term plan for a decision once a proper policy had been, I didn't think that they were turned down completely. I thought that we still had to consider their request for the funding of the we didn't have a policy. Yes, we needed a policy, but we still had to consider their initial request, and I'm sure it was referred to the long-term plan. So just like the West Otago Vintage Club request, the Kaitangata request should be being considered now as well.
So through you, Worship, historically CCTV cameras have only been put in Balclutha, and that was done as part of the Main Street project and funded as part of the Main Street project. The intent is to do the same thing when we do the Milton Main Street project, to put those cameras in there too. There isn't a Main Street rate for Kaitangata, so you might need to consider an alternative way of funding it, but it could be funded through their Parks and Reserves budget or something like that. That was what you want to do.
So, yeah, I felt last week, I voted against it, not because I thought it wasn't a good idea to have security cameras in a whack, but because we hadn't settled on this policy, voting on it, we've made a precedent for small towns that they need to pretty much front up with the contribution before we consider it.
That was where I was too.
Yeah, before we've done the policy.
We've kind of, mucked around, and I do feel sorry for Kaitangata who have come and asked, and we really have given them.
Well, if they'd come with half the money, we probably would have said yes.
No, but
We might have, but we never had that
We
discussion.
didn't actually have that discussion. It never came to that because it was referred to the long-term plan for discussion.
So through you, Your Worship,
Lee?
Councillor Ludeman is correct in what was said out of the long-term plan. The discussion that the paper that informed this, that was in the documentation last week, which we didn't get to, indicated that we didn't have sufficient resources to fully consider the aspects that were agreed, which were consult widely around in order to inform the policy, and that would then inform the conversation about Ko Tangata. So that's basically still on the table, but as you might appreciate, it's just a case of scheduling what we can do. But the process for doing the long-term plan is still, of doing the policy is still in progress. And what was discussed, if I can recall correctly last week, was the substantial reason about in the debate, as I understand it, was Awaka was basically coming forward with 50% contribution, and that carried the day for a number of councillors, if I understood.
Yep.
And that's what went ahead. So in terms of the question about Kaitanga in particular, it's not finished, but it's not happened yet.
So, excuse me, so at the end of the day, there's nothing stopping Kaitangata from coming back to the table with the proposal again.
Correct. And
So what's the problem?
so, and through your worship, that was the purpose of having that second point in order to, if we will get had of. Yes, that's, as I'd say to people, there's nothing stopping the community coming in and talking to council. So, but the preconditions of that would be ideally that they have a case. They can demonstrate it meets legal requirements or will meet legal requirements, and the other matters there.
So, I mean, I get that, but I question it. But if that's the way it's to roll, we actually need to let Kaitangata know, because they were told that it would be forwarded through to the long-term plan for decision then. So we need to go back to Kaitangata and let them know they're out of the mix. You need to resubmit, because we were definitely told Kai that it would be part of the long-term plan. So we'll actually have to let them, if that's not the case, that's why we're asking the question now, we need to go back to them and let them know what the process is. And I think that's how it was left for them.
Is it Joyce, who did it?
Joyce.
Yeah, Joyce. Can we just go back and that clarification?
So
I don't want to get told up what you said.
No, in meantime, the policy is done so that it's in place before the long-term plan, a decision.
Righto, we've done the cameras, we've done West Otago, we haven't done swimming pools.
We're ready to go.
So
One more.
What they have to do.
What are we on? Annual management day. In the pools.
So
Who?
if I, Steve, in the interim, we were talking about what to do with the carryover from last week. A number of councils had specific issues that they wished to pick up on. And we had one more, which was the swimming pools.
No, it was the asset management plans. I've gone and had a look at my grumpy notes that I had made, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail other than to say, I think the swimming pools, definitely the parks and reserves, just update some figures on them that actually, honestly, or else let me have another read of them if you think they're ready to go out, and then I might disagree. There's just some old figures in there that they just could do with a bit of updating. If they're to go out of the long-term plan, they should be up to speed. And like this, the one I'm in is Parks and Reserves, and down the bottom it's got the AMP 2021 Parks and Reserves thing. So just some of it will be minor, I know, but it's not a good look when it's going out with your long-term plan that was.
So through you, Worship, and I might ask Steve to join in a response to that. It's going to be a busy time over the next period of weeks, where we're going to do our best endeavours to, before that meeting of the 25th, bring information to you maybe in pre-tranches, so it all doesn't turn up.
Fine.
But that, will be subject to just getting through the work.
Yeah, no, and look, I'm sure you'll see that my comments as you go through them, so just to read.
It's just for you, your worship, just if you can make some time to catch up early, we can just go through them and pass them on.
So can it be noted councillor Graham's leaving and I no longer have to do a casting vote? Should have gone hours ago, Bruce. Should have gone hours ago.
I've been asleep for that.
This one,
Put your rubbish away.
Merry Christmas.
Cheers.
Rubbish.
Right, sorry, Michelle, did you?
No.
There was nothing? Then where was I going? Oh no, Bruce was telling me he was gone. Is there anything else then that we need before we hit Steve? Done?
Oh, sorry, right.
No, sure.
Okay, so, Sharon's just connecting in, are you, Sharon?
Trying to, yeah.
Okay, so we'll just. do
Enter
that.
and sign in, please.
So, what we're looking at doing is taking the changes that you've been given direction on, using the version 2 rates pages, which I'll just remind you included smoothing using $7 million of debt and $4 million of debt in years 1 and 2, and then paying it back over subsequent years, but giving us the debt problem on the debt pages relating to that in years 2 and 3 and subsequent years. So what we've done is Sharon's done the homework on that to show what the impact of the decisions are. And why we were taking some time is because it highlighted that it looked good from a rates perspective, only because it included $7 million of debt, but it really made a bad problem with the debt profile in year 2. And so what we were doing was looking at, okay, so what are the potential options that we need to deal with for that? I'm just highlighting that what she's going to show you first is where we got to with the 7 million or 4 million debt smoothing, and what it looks like in the rates. So bringing it up there, it moved to 15.81% in year 1, and then to 20% in years 2 and 3. But that might sound better than where we were before. But if Sharon shows us now the debt profile, that's the debt.
Oh, no, do I?
Unless you share your whole computer.
What page are we looking at now, sorry?
No, we're not. We are looking at the screen when we can get it up for the work that it's done. We haven't been able to print anything in time. You've got it, but we haven't, Sharon. That's not funny.
Coming. It takes time.
So what that does is it says, okay, look, more headroom. There's still headroom in year 1, but it puts us into strife in year 2, worse so, as a result of that. And the reason is, where you're so successful at removing rates and you're dropping it down to 15%, you haven't got the revenue necessary to do that. So the one of the options is, you need to put expenditure back in to try and, certainly within the first 3 years, get debt limit to where it needs to be. And so when I say that, I mean, you could put expenditure, you talked before, your worship, let's look at depreciation, but that's actually going to worsen it because it's reducing it. But you could put more money into depreciation or those sorts of things, which is better use of the money. And so what I just want to show you is, other than other than going to one or two particular big projects that are left and say, we need to change track and do something different, but we can talk about that. The alternative is actually putting expenditure back into year one. So we propose to put expenditure back in to bring us up to 20%.
19.8.
Well, we can play with the specifics, your worship, but Sharon, if we just threw a figure in to get it in there, and could you show the figures? We put in 1.5 million, but we could put 1.450, but let's just see the 1.5 million just for the principal discussion, to see what that means. So that's deliberately ensuring the rates revenue is at a reasonable level to achieve debt and subsequent.
But that's with the depreciation phased in over 3 years.
No, this isn't touching depreciation.
The depreciation's there, so it's like, I'm removing 1.5 million in year one and 7 in year two, which is 50% and 25%.
So it is that which is.
Yeah, sorry, we have done it, yes. It included all your destruction. So, destruction.
Ooh, 2 years of 20. 3 years of 20. Yeah. That'll make meltdown.
Okay, so just take the principle, which is putting more revenue in. Why? Okay, so show the debt side of it. Yeah.
Just incidentally, I was talking to David Rowe. He's got a property in Cromwell. He said his property's gone up by 40%. His rates have gone up by 40% over the last 2 years.
Doesn't mean anything.
Capital value went up probably 500.
I don't think so.
It's not a race.
So what that does is it doesn't give you much, but it does give you headroom in year one and we're covered in years 2 and 3. But that's only because we've actually put more expenditure in and obviously increased the rates.
Other way.
Yeah.
Just so I can see those 3 figures.
Or
No, keep going, you're going the wrong way. Give us the 3 figures that shows the difference. Yeah, almost, yeah, there.
Sharon, it still shows actually minus 736, but I thought we'd actually.
Need to adjust 2 million.
Oh yes, okay, so sorry. And then that was using the spread of 7 million debt, 4 million debt, and then repaying it. And we identified that actually we probably needed to only use 2 million rather than the 4 million in year 2. Because we've got that problem. So that'll increase the rates in year 2, but we thought year 2 was year 1, your worship. And so that was the final thing we did to just meet debt limit requirements.
Can I just roll it back, because it is net debt. How much did you include that we get off our investments?
They were accumulating.
Yeah, at what, 5.25? Right.
So sorry, so Sharon, yes, so sorry. Okay, then go backwards to show what that meant for the rates change. So year 2 goes up to what year one might be, but it covers it. Now, the only other thing, the only other thing that's possible is, look at what's left in big year 2 and 3. Oh, sorry, years 1 and 2. The big projects in that sense is the Milton Hall and Library. But we talk about this, and the tricky thing would be, it would be a pretty big reversal that we would be consulting on if that was going to be the case, as opposed to consulting on this. The problem with consulting on this and then making a decision later is that you haven't consulted on that, and so we sort of stuck with not being able to decide on that next one. But that's the type of, you know, example of where we are heading with the change that you have made. So our job is just to say, how does this work? We think that this is the thing that's killing us is the debt limit. You've got to have a reasonable amount of revenue for the debt, right? So is that palatable to go out with?
No.
Well,
Hard to swallow,
And-
but.
In fact, because like Richard Davidson was on my tail with afternoon smoko, and I said we're fighting to keep it under 20. Wherever we go, we're just bouncing around. So that's probably as near to where the whole day, none of us like it. It all heads, it's sort of semantics. Do we bankrupt the people in year 3 or do we wait to year 5 or whatever? It's bloody awful, but what that will give us is some hope that the government can intervene with this. We've been saying for how many years? We need additional revenue streams. The local government funding structure is ruptured. Something's going to come to a head, and I suspect every council's pretty much looking at something like this. It's going to force their hand. I never thought that Clutha District would ever be looking at figures like that. Guess what? 3 waters.
So where's the 1.5? Where's that? What are you putting against that figure that you've given me?
Appreciation.
Appreciation. Appreciation.
Yeah.
Because we've taken it out above. Yeah.
Would it make any difference if it's the other option, interest only? You know, one that if there was 2 million to rattle around and it was going to put it on, it won't make any difference, will it? Well,
Well, property income's a double-edged sword.
yeah, but which one's better to do it through depreciation or zero and no payment in principle? They both trigger the
well,
right.
the problem is you worship and you're thinking about just books and keeping, you know, prudency and doing what you're supposed to do, you know, not paying principal and just paying interest can't be a prudent situation. Like before, when we made that decision, it was on the basis that we were going to lose our debt.
Yeah.
That was a valid decision. But without having that to support it, a decision just to pay interest and not principal is like, I would think totally imprudent.
Today's been all about ask the question.
Yeah.
We ask every question. So,
Councillor McTiernan.
Tom.
Just come back to that Milton Pulse scenario, because we had earlier that no doubt the tenders are going to go higher. We've got 13.5 million. Sounds to me like you're going to, excluding the libraries, you're going to see 17, 18 million come into that pool. There's a sort of inevitability about it, and I wonder what this scenario looks like without that debt borrowed. Because if we are going to have to keep going down the Three Waters path of upgrading more Three Waters assets, we somehow need that borrowing capacity there. They have to take precedent over the problem.
I mean, one thing, a little like outside, we're outside. We haven't even looked at that specifically, but the argument will be we're telling everybody that the district, without increasing rates again and again and again, even more than what's been projected, and over the 10 years, it's a doubling of rates, to still see that we are not meeting a debt cap for quite a number of those years out there, right? So we've always said the message was the requirements that are being asked of us in terms of that capital side of things is unsustainable for these communities without some form of funding. Those graphs just show that, right? So that doesn't help significantly in terms of where we're going at the end. Absolutely helps in the beginning.
It does help that debt cap, and then there still is the possibility, and I'd say just reading from Mr. Brown's letter today, there will be changes as to what we get to do with disposal of wastewater for land, so that we may be able to write under.
So I suppose where we are, is it, if no one's got an alternative and it's semantics really, we're moving the deck chairs around. Are we rolling with that? Is the question we ask. Yeah, that's it, John, you know, we can fiddle with it a wee bit, but every time we fiddle, so is that what we're rolling with?
We've done due diligence today by going over everything step by step. I mean, hey, some councils are way out there and hurry, but we've got to wear it.
Really on 25.
Well, this is where.
Thomas put up the
Sharon, are you able to flip that to us so I can, you know, so we've got to.
We will, obviously we'll give it to you. We didn't have time to do that. We just need to show you what we're playing with.
I'll take it. It's not much change really. Here, isn't it, really?
Oh, you started at
25, 20.
I can send it.
Yeah, it's just 18.
That page would be-
Puts around that 50. That's the one.
Yeah.
that
Well, which was always going to be the case, like we said. You can't reduce your revenue too much without hitting a deficit. Yep.
It's the triangle. There's the picture of the triangle. So what's the debate?
Well, we need to, I don't know whether all your council is agreeing with their position, or whether we do something else.
Guys, can we just slam it down for a minute? There is our reality. Hold on a minute, Ms. Gaynor. There is our reality. We can bounce around with it, but Steve and the team need to know, is that our final position for today? Has anyone got a?
If you want to start again, we can have another day that we all go through this, or do anything more you want to do if you feel there's not enough time. I'm just saying that it's not something I want to do, but you know, like we're getting to the end of the day and we're looking at this, you have to be comfortable around, well, have we exhausted the options? I said to you, like others, there's only a couple of biggies that are left, but we talked about it, and the problem is huge change of direction at this point. And is that something you do or not?
Tell me what they are, Steve, just so I know that you're saying a couple of biggies and I'm thinking.
Well, it's the Milton Library.
Yeah.
Which
Reduce
is
the car park.
which is a big change of direction, if that was to be the case.
What year was that kick up?
Years 2 and 3.
Yeah, so the main rates impact is year 3.
But the debt, it's two.
Yep.
Yeah, that's the thing a year. Ally.
It would be a juggling of figures slightly. Is there any way we could make years 1, 2 and 3 similar? So we have got year 2 high at 24 point whatever, and year 3 at 14.8 or whatever. Is there any way we could slightly shift
319s or something, but
some figures, which may be able to be easily enough done by slipping the Milton Pool or something, because it's not going to be built in, like, if you just maybe a bit of a look as you're going out. I know that that'll change anyway, because while it's the long-term plan, and we look at the 3 years more so, but after year 1, when you redo your annual plan, those figures will change. But it's more as you're going out with your consultation for the long-term plan, how it will be perceived, perhaps.
Yep.
We've got people coming. And I think there's a chance with some of those bigger ones to actually
Really?
slightly jiggle these two.
Sharon, can you consider that? I don't know how, and I'll go to Wayne.
I just want to answer the question like Simon brought up a good point about the pool. It's been a decade over budget. We're seeing that we're maxed out on our debt. So what happens there, like if pool's 3 million over budget, are we able to fund it?
We breached the breach.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why I'm asking, where's the money going to come from?
Have we already got estimates it's going to be over budget by 2 million?
We don't have the confirmed estimates.
And that's the one question I'll go away with, Steve, is we're breaching our debt limit in a number of the years. What does that mean? You know, we go, so we hit that year, and like, well, no money. Do we stop paying bills, or what happens when we hit that, there was one, yeah, when it was getting up, what actually happened?
Well, that's an LGFA thing, isn't it, Sharon, that thing? So I mean, it means if we breach that limit without doing anything else, like some of those other councils can get up to 280%. It just means, I would assume that we can't get a loan from LGFA because, we breached the limit.
So it's really
We don't get it, we don't get the fund.
Means you're on chocolate wheels.
Yeah, but as a, not being sensible, what happens?
You sell
That's
assets.
already more money.
Yeah, I know, so then, next week, we've already made that commitment. We'll
Sell your push bike, sell your car.
I mean,
stop operating for a month.
we could, you know, again, we could explore in year one, the issue of, getting a credit rating.
I think we're gonna, not credit rating.
Well,
Yeah, that's the way to go.
That's the way to do it, to increase that, debt. I mean, it doesn't change, you know, that you're still gonna need, you know, it's only debt paying for it, right? It doesn't stop the cost of the ratepayer,
So
it's
let's,
just getting the money.
yeah, so let's say we did that. Look, because quite literally, we can't, you know, we've got a fiduciary responsibility to not become insolvent knowingly. So consequently, we can see it there, we have no option other than to go down that path. We have to.
It doesn't make a big difference to the rating.
No.
The rates figures that we've got, you know, unless you're gonna go overboard and you know, try to solve all by debt, but that's just not gonna work, because you've got to have that rating income up to be able to service it. So you can't just take advantage of that and say, bang, now away, we can do all these things or whatever, without increasing the rates. Right? So that's just the worst thing you can do. It just means that, you know, you don't breach the technical aspects of the limit side of it. That's not an issue. So we can look at that. I mean, I always thought that the LTP we're putting out is only showing 1 and 2, and we lose all the debt. And any other LTP we do that shows all these breaches and limits, you know, highlights the issue of the unsustainability aspects, and we have to reference that in if we were writing the consultation document with the full 10 years, one of your big consultation questions would be, you know, hey, these requirements are unsustainable. You know, and you know, it's highlighting that the district can't be expected to be spending and paying for all that, right? Without some sort of support. Big matter that you'd be saying. Because, you know, you can jiggle bits and pieces, but there aren't many solutions to those in debt things. Because whilst the rate movements, as Sharon pointed out to me, aren't that bad towards the end, the dollar amounts are already hugely high right at the end. Right? So, you know, you can say, oh, we'll need to put some more expenditure, but you're doing it on top of something that's already, you know, doubling by year 10.
Because Joe Mooney said, you'll remember anyone that went to it, said that, you know, we'll give you access to cheap government money. And it's just more string around our neck, because you've got a conflict still, so maybe that is the solution they see, and all councils just have to string it out, but that's all part of the unknown, and we've settled for where we are today, are we, council?
I'm happy with
Well, that is the reality. No, okay then, does anyone have a counter proposal to put forward before we put to a vote?
Only what I said, but is that not really a possibility?
I can certainly have a look at that as long as we don't breach the debt thing.
Yeah, yeah, I mean.
Just, we can do that
Yeah.
through the.
Yeah, so I'm still, if that was a possibility, you know, it might not be as you work through that.
I think the problem is that you're at 25% for year 2.
Yeah.
And that's with very little headroom, right?
Yes.
It's basically, you know, it was next to nothing headroom, like just about $1 million headroom. So I'm just thinking to you that, you know,
no, year 2, we were -3.
No, we fixed that, Your Worship.
That's okay, just a comment, and if
Yeah.
not.
Well, I'm trying to say that in principle, yes, but in theory, year 2 is the problem now because there's very little headroom. So you can't reduce the rates in year 2. without breaching it even further. So, you don't have those sort of, options.
Okay, where is that up?
If that is.
So, let's have a vote on it. What we saw there within the wiggles that Ali's telling us about, that's what everyone settled on. Those that are in favour, please put your hand up. well, you're giving to some and you're missing others. If we don't, I think we've got a moral obligation to, at the moment, knowing that we're taking pensioners and vulnerable to a place they can't go, we've got a moral obligation to at least explore. I appreciate what Steve's done and the fact that first draft, first cut. I'm not going to say no to it because I want to see where it is. Ideologically, I agree with that, but financially, I said that it's got a few flaws because it's given to some but others. So I'll roll with it at the moment, but I'd love to know where everyone else is.
Can I just explain it?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
So I'm only looking, all I've done is replicated previously, so don't bother with that, those that have been in the workshop. If you just go to the last page. All right, last page is just the table. So what I was trying to show in the first table is, and this is before we've made the changes, but it was based on the version 2 cuts that went, version 2 amounts that went out, as an example, where you had townships with the example rates percentages in the second column. And the 23-24 rates, which is current rates, is listed in the third column. And the way the principle is working is, anything over time, we were thinking maybe 4% is eligible for the additional rebate. And I just calculated, since this is pretty high and I was only working first model at 15%, what does that look like in terms of value of rebate? This is in addition to the government rebate, which would be $750. Okay, so that's quite a bit higher than what was in the original model in that. And so that's all I'm using it to do. And then secondly, second table, so the value of the rebate that we would provide was that, in the first table, was that far right? So you're talking, fair amount of dollars to 640, 650 current applicants, probably a few more than that as the rates go up, but it's limited by the government's criteria anyway. So we identify the numbers. And then the second table, using the same things, is put in a dollar sense around what it would mean to somebody, is that the 23-24 rates paid by the ratepayer on a full rebate is that first column, right? It's that range 221721. That's what they're paying in dollar terms today with the rebate. And if it moved to the version 2 version before we changed it, which remember was about 25% average level, and they get the full government, they would go rebate, they would go up. So the bulk leaser would be 2.2, they would go up to 2.9. So the pensioner would be going up, $700. And that's what you can see as the difference that would be happening, even with the full rebate, which doesn't change, it stays at 750, right? So it's reflecting in a dollar sense what those people would see, right? And then the 24-25 rates paid, if you added the additional value of the rebate that we might provide, would make that change in that third column. So the difference of movement is quite a bit less. And then you can compare it to what those full rates would be in 24-25. Now, there's a couple of issues just on the top of the principle, is that, it's quite a big difference from saying 4% is where we would apply the support. You've got option. You could say, well, no, if we're starting at 20% now, you could say, I think 4% is too low. I think, everybody needs to pay some fair share, and you could do 6% or 8% before you do it. So all that does is reduces the value of the rebate, right? Because, looking at these figures, the risk to us is that obviously we're going to be using a chunk more of the investment return than we had previously done, right? And so, it's a fair chunk. And the suggestion would be, if there is value in this, and I think, if you are taking the vulnerable person perspective and just look at that movement in columns 1 and 2, right? That's what they're going to be faced with, right? If you just look at that, then, and if you feel that we should be in a position to assist that side of things, and we can be in a position, then we can play around with, exactly how much we contribute. But I think the point I was trying to say is, do I persist with that as a principle? Because, now we've identified what the rates are going to be, and you can actually see, based on version 2, what that movement is. Or do you want me to desist from, that principle, which may simply be a consultation item anyway, because it's not a decision, it would be done later. And I just need that direction. I've just tried my best to deal with that, what I think is going to be a fundamental problem.
Appreciate it. What's your thoughts, everyone?
Firstly, so what happens the following year? That they'll, if we get another 22% rise, so they will have to pay that 19%, but they'll have to pay another $600 that second year, won't they? But they're just going to go up at a lesser rate than
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. And also, I just wonder whether that threshold is quite tight, the income bands. I'm thinking, you keep talking about those pensioner examples, but I'm thinking, say, a young couple with 3 kids that's scrimped and saved and bought a house, suddenly they got a mortgage at 7 or 8%. It's pretty hard to, their disposable income is going to be pretty tight too.
Yeah, our problem, of course, is that any expansion of it is just more dollars than.
Yeah, this is on the assumption that the extension is with their own properties, but there's also going to be a lot of people struggling.
The criteria is just based on income bands, which may or may not.
But it affects effectively pensioners because there won't be many people with an income less than 38,000 with their own house. But that is working.
You might just be surprised. I got Land Cuts Labourers 2 years ago got $22,000. One of them owned houses.
Yeah, and I mean, the point is that we could still do further work that says, hey, I'm not happy about the quantum, but it's more about, is it something that you want to be including in where you are suddenly getting into some sort of contribution to the rates rebate side of things, or whoever's in that situation? And is that where you want to go? You can play around limitations, rules, criteria, all this sort of stuff, but fundamentally, for the lower end of our rate payers, do you want to be doing something?
Come on, team, let's get some voice going.
Yeah, you do anyway. Because I am
I don't tell them to shout.
I have a mother that puts in for the rates rebate. For a long time, she wouldn't, because she wouldn't take, wasn't her, even though she was in the bracket that could take it. And I know for a fact she's starting to struggle. And a lot of people out there are with insurances and everything else. I think, we put out a lot of money over the years and we've done this and we've done that. So we've got that money sitting aside. Why aren't we using it? Help out keep our people in their homes. Okay, a lot of them are talking of selling homes and moving into council flats, which we haven't got enough of. Yeah, I tell you what, it is a big stress on our elderly, and they are pinching pennies as much as they can everywhere. The rates rebate scheme the government put in is great. I still know there's a lot out there that don't use it, that should be using it. This is probably going to force people's hands a bit more, and maybe we do a bit more promo on it to get them using it properly. Our libraries, ladies and services there are really great. They've only got to go in and they'll help them pull out the forms and the rest of it. I think you'll find going forward, a lot of our younger families that can't afford homes don't get on the market. Other ones that are sitting in the market, the middle row ones, maybe like ourselves, we will be thinking of what we're going to do in the future, because we aren't going to be able to carry on existing as you have to have that house and be that homeowner. So, yeah, the whole thing has shifted. But thanks for the work you've done, Steve. I think it's a great idea.
Oh, well, I'm prepared to say something. I think it's a bit of a rat's nest, to be quite honest. I'd be interested to know what the results are. I feel as though it's a compounding thing with that demographic. We know we're going to get more and more of this scenario as we go. And I mean, we've just been working really hard on budgets and things today to get scrimp and save. This is going to be a blowout figure that will, in my mind, will compound and compound, especially if you get down to those lower income people as well. And how many are there? There's a lot of things we don't know, and I'd like the work to be done, but I wouldn't like to make any decisions right now. Yeah.
Well, the question, the decision though is, do I do more work?
Yeah.
I mean,
So I'm saying yes to the work. Yes.
Because I agree that we've got 3 years of 20% or something, which wasn't contemplated in the first round of things that we were looking at. And we do have to give consideration to compounding side of things. And that might mean a lower lower rate than we're talking, but that's work that could be done.
I would definitely need to see some more. I actually probably, to be fair, don't support it. I think we're setting a better precedent. Yes. I accept that our elderly are struggling, but I also feel that some of our young families, as Simon has indicated, are struggling as well. And yeah, I think it's a bit of a precedent I'm not that comfortable with.
From my perspective, and you know that it's just one brain tax. The hesitation I have with it is that when council tries to cast a social wand over our communities, it gets lumpy. And already we're seeing that we will quite literally be taking, it's not the money, but it is, of the young vulnerable family. And so you don't qualify even though you're doing it hard. I'm trying to think of what the example was that we did about 15 years ago as a council. We did something and it ended up just the same. But then I slapped myself around the face and think that in 2 years' time, we're taking a single pensioner from $1 and $8.50 down to $1 and $5.54. And that's extrapolating theirs out of a 4% increase. In 2 years' time, we will be taking many of them to a place they cannot go. So we've got to do something. Even if Steve does the work on it, and sorry, Steve, load you up, you do the work, and then we go, no, we've got to do it. We owe it to them, and we owe it to ourselves, actually. Because this is just a bloody ghastly situation. Why?
I sort of agree with what's been said. I'd like to see Steve do further work on it because we are in difficult times. They've got the elderly, the young people, but also the council's going to be struggling, as well. So, we can't always be the giver. We've also got to look at ourselves as well and say, well, we've got to do things a bit smarter. I do agree with, the elderly and the younger generation because we've all been there, but also we're struggling as well. So we've got to look at different avenues. I would support doing some more work on it.
So I'll put it, hold on, have we got any more before going?
I think it's not just the elderly and just the young. There's the middle lot in between there as well. And like I say, it is a real concern, but I think we need to do the exercise to see what the effect will be and then make our decisions from there. To sit around and do nothing is not an option. So we need to start and just see how it's going to come out, please.
Can I just have one clarification? The original rates was from the taxpayers union figures they go through? Is that where we got them from?
Oh, no, that's what I did on my first version.
Right,
This version has the version 2. That's what I was waiting for.
Where we started using our own? Because not being awful, I found the taxpayers union, they just about need to take their socks off.
That's why we're talking this year's rates, 3,000 about.
Yeah.
Sure. So then your calculations here, Steve, is that then related to, because that investment fund is part of your net debt equation as well? Is that calculated as well? Are you going to start eating up your equity? That's increasing.
Yeah, no.
It's true that.
It's
true that the revenue of investment return, is included in the total revenue. And yes, it's true that if we use more, some more of that, but it would be the same if there was always that discretion between a late subsidy, which was only 2.27% of the 5.2% return. There was always the question of what we were going to do with the difference. But I agree with you that, the original proposal was just based on lower amounts and a different profile, right? And all I was doing was doing it on the basis of the original proposal. Definitely highlights some issues associated with that. And, we just need to look at that and I'm suspecting that it will be a relatively proposed reduction in rebate in that there. And you might say afterwards that, you don't want to proceed with it. Or you might say, well, okay, get out of it. So that's fine. We'll just do that home.
We could have a vote. So if no one's got any.
Right, just had a quick look at the rates rebate calculator here, and for somebody who's if they're paying about $3,800 a year in rates, and that includes all rates, including regional council ones. Somebody with 2 dependents, so 2 children, if they're getting an household income of $44,000 or less, they get a full $750 rebate. It goes down a bit after that. So we're not just talking about the elderly by any means.
No. And actually, it is it's central government responsibility. For us. We are very much taking off one to give to the other. So are they, but they've affected. We're under resourced. If Bruce is the final one, so can we have some direction, please? So all those in favour of Steve further pursuing this option, please raise your hands. Say 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Those against, please raise your hand. Say no. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we just carry on with 1. Yep. Thank you. That's direction. Peter, have we got anything else? I think it's that, isn't it? That's true. I think yes. Right. Okay, team, firstly, she's been a big day. I want to acknowledge the fact I did most definitely pick up on the fact that there are a number of staff in here at 6 o'clock in the morning. I also know last week there was a number of councillors that were reading their paper at 1:47 in the morning. I don't think this is going to be the last time this long-term plan keeps us awake somehow. Take heart in the fact that today we put some rigour in the system, and I appreciate the fact that we did hold together, guys. It is important when the pressure goes on that we go through the process and don't provide. So I want to acknowledge that. I want to thank Steve and the entire team for the attitude that they brought to the table and the effort. It's going to be, we haven't done uncharted waters, we knew we were, so and it's also now my last chance on that. I wish you all a Merry Christmas. Let's go away and have a bit of a break and come back to what will be undoubtedly an interesting 2024. Really, everyone.